Mem Vavam Viz. In the middle of the page, and we are at
Mem Vav, did you say?
Mem Vav 46b. Amar of Yehudah Amarav, which is right in the middle of the widest lines. First word in line is Shenemar. Yep.
Okay.
Amar of Yehudah Amarav. Yehudah says in the name of Rav, Kol Malvas Chaveroi Arba Amis, the ear ain't a nizik. Someone who escorts his friend 4 Amis will not be damaged. Ravina Alve Larova Bar Yitzchak Dalat Amis Be'er, Model Yodi Hizeka V'Istzil. And there was some sort of event that came that would have caused him harm, and he was saved from the harm because he walked him 4 Amis. Tonar Rabbanon Harav Talmud Ad Ibur Shalir. A rabbi escorting his student escorts him to the edge of the city. Chaver lechaver, 2 contemporaries, friends. Ad Tchum Shabbos, an additional Tchum Shabbos, 2,000 Amis. Talmud l'Rav, a student to a teacher. Ein leishir, there's no limit. The kamas. So what is the limit? Right. Amar Sheish is ad parasa. It's a parasa. That's about a seventh of the distance you can walk in a day. This is only true if it wasn't his Rabbi Muvik. Rabbi Muvik shlosh parsais. If it's the teacher that he learned the majority of his Torah from, it's three of these measurements. Rav Kahana Alvelo Simi Barashi. Rav Kahana escorted Rav Simi Barashi Mipum Naro Ad Beit Sunisa the Bavel. He escorted him from the edge of the river until the city of Beit Sunisa. And Beit Sunisa is a place with a lot of palm trees. Kimoto Hasim, when they got there, Amrleh, he says to him, is it true that which they say that these palm trees were planted at the time of Adam Harishon? Amar he says to him, at Karat Milsi, you reminded me of something that I learned. Amar Rav Chanina. Rav Chanina taught as follows: in a land where no man has passed and no man has settled. If nobody passed through there, how would it be possible for anybody to live there, settle there? So the Gemara says, Elawat, Eretz shegozer ala Adam Rishon lishav nisyashva. Eretz shelo gozer ala Adam Rishon lo nisyashva. A land that Adam Rishon declared would be settled would eventually be settled. Land that Adam Rishon declared would not be settled, is not settled. And he pointed out, therefore, it could be that this place of Beit Sunisa was a place that Adam Rishon dedicated to growing palm trees, and that's why these palm trees have been here since Adam Rishon. Rav Mordechai Alvei Rav Ashi meHagrunya v'ad Beikipi. He escorted him from the city of Hagrunya until Beikipi. V'amrila ad Beiduri. Some say it was until the city of Beiduri. Amar V'yechon Mishum Rav Meir. Rav Yechon says the name of Rav Meir. Kol she'enai malva u'mislava. Someone who isn't escorted and doesn't escort. Ki'ilu shayfech dam. It's as if he's killing people. She'almala livu an she'yaricha le'elisha lagira doivim l'tinaikas. So the Gemara will go through here the story of the people from Yericho. Yericho was plagued by misfortune. People would die seemingly at random, and also the water supply was poisoned. And we'll see here, Elisha cured the city, but they did not escort him. They let Elisha cure the waters of the city. He was not escorted. He left the city, and then a bunch of people tried to tease him. We'll see the story now. Shnemar. So, and what happened was eventually bears came and ate these kids that were teasing him. Shnemar v'yal.
All right.
V'yal misham Beisel who ola b'derech. He left the city to go to Bethel, and he's going on the road alone. He wasn't escorted. So now what happened was, because the water supply was what they call contaminated, and Elisha cured the water supply. Now, obviously, you might expect, like in any bureaucratic business, Elisha displaced a bunch of people by doing that. All the water carriers that were making money from schlepping water from outside the city were now out of business, and they weren't too pleased with this. So these Na'arim Ketanim, these young, the Gemara calls them young kids. We'll see they weren't young. They weren't kids either. They were just immature. So these Na'arim Ketanim came out. Vayiskalsule, they started insulting him. Vayamarle, they said, Alei Karach, get out of here, baldy. Karach is baldy. Amarle, Alei shehikrachta aleinu asamakim. You've ruined our business, basically. So the Gemara says, "Ma'in Na'arim Ketanim." What does it mean, young kids? Amar Belazar sheminu arim min mitzvahs. It means that these people were empty of mitzvahs. Ketanim shayim mikatne amuna. These were people that didn't believe in Hashem. Small-minded people. Tanan Na'arim hayu. They were actually young, but they behaved as if they were children. Because these were teenagers, they behaved as if they were children. Rav Yosef says, maybe they came from the city called Nar, and in Eretz Yisrael, it rested Nairaktana, a child, a girl who was a child. Kashlan Nairaktana, if she was a Naira, she wasn't Iktana. Amar Padas Katana de Urin. She was a young girl, but she came from the town of Neurin. So the Gemara says, over there, we don't know which city she came from, so we say she came from the city of Neurin. However, in our Gemara, we know where they came from. They came from Yerichai. So we're not going to suggest that we know that they're from Yerichai, but they also came from the city of Nuar. So therefore, obviously, Na'arim Ketana means these were adults, but they behaved like children, and they had no mitzvahs, or they were teenagers and they behaved like children. He turned around and he saw them by Kollel b'shem Hashem, and he cursed them in the name of God. Ma'ra, what did he see? Rav Mamish. He actually saw them. Rishon taught, wherever the rabbis quote unquote looked, they saw. You have either poverty or death. By the way, one of the common deaths in the Talmud, if somebody was disgraced a rabbi, the penalty often was that he looked at him and he became a pile of bones. Like Shimon Bar Yochai and Yehudah ben Gerim. Yehudah ben Gerim was guilty of carrying the message that Shimon Bar Yochai had a very negative statement on the Roman Empire, and Yehudah ben Gerim was one who spread it. When he found Yehudah ben Gerim, he looked at him, and he became a pile of bones. Okay, so in other words, simply Elisha looking at them killed them. Shmuel says, obviously in Yom Kippur there's a prohibition of marital intimacy, and all these kids all became pregnant. Their conception all happened in Yom Kippur. Said, he saw they had a bluris, a kekamerim. They had a haircut, a hairstyle that was, like the non-Jewish style. Rabbi Yochanan said, he saw that there was no, even a minor amount of mitzvahs. Maybe their children would have. Nowhere in their bloodline would anyone form mitzvahs. So what was the penalty? 2 bears came out of a forest, and they cut down 42 kids. Rav Shmuel, there's a debate. One of them says nes, one of them says it's a miracle. One of them says it was a miracle within a miracle. The one who says it was a nes says that there was a forest, but there were no bears in the forest. There was neither a forest nor bears. So the miracle was it became a forest and there became bears. So the Gemara says, well, what do you need the forest for? Just make the bears, right? Why was it necessary to create a forest for the bears? Now I can't say I fully understand this answer. Okay, so Gemara says the beisi, because if not for the forest, then the beers would be scared. They'd be more hesitant to kill. Therefore, God created a forest and beards. It's interesting, right? Because you think God would create a beer that isn't scared. Once he's creating beers anyway, might as well create a beer that isn't scared of living outside a forest. Evidently, despite the fact that would have been a possibility, God would have preferred to create a forest. Okay.
46A now?
Yeah, top of the page. So just allergies to it, just very bad.
Again, right there.
Okay. Rav Chanina says these 42 kids that were killed. The evil force, the origination of that evil force that allowed 42 kids to be killed was the fact that Balak, when he hired Bilam to curse the Jewish people, he brought 42 sacrifices. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. A person should perform Torah and mitzvahs even if he's not doing it to honor God. Because doing it without intention for God, it will come to honor God. Because of the 42 sacrifices that Balak, the king of Moav, brought, 47a.
Thank you.
About 12 lines down. First one line is Rus. Shiyatzim menu Shlomo. Rus, who eventually was the progenitor of Shlomo Melech, King Solomon. Shekasabe, that of King Solomon, it says, Elef Oilos Ya'ala Shlomo. Shlomo Melech brought 1,000 sacrifices in a day. V'Amr Rav Yossi ben Chuni taught, Rus bita shel Eglon b'nei shel Balak Haisa. Rus was the daughter of Eglon, the son of Balak. I presume Eglon wasn't actually the son of Balak, but he was Balak was the ancestor of Eglon. Eglon was the king of Moav during the time of the Shoftim. Rus was the daughter of Eglon. So ultimately she was the descendant of Balak. And therefore you see here that Balak, because he intended on bringing the sacrifices to honor God, he actually merited to have a descendant, Rus, and effectively Shlomo Melech. So you see here that this was sort of a good thing. So the Gemara says, no. The real reason why he brought it was to curse the Jewish people, and that's why ultimately it had an effect to curse the 42 kids that died in the time of Elisha. Now, it's also true that he merited descendants because he did it for the wrong reasons, and it doesn't make a difference if you do things for the wrong reasons. But because he did the right thing for the wrong reasons, actually some of those wrong reasons came to bear fulfillment when those 42 kids were killed. So now the Gemara is talking about the city. The Gemara mentions another interesting feature about the city. Don't you see we like living in the city? The Gemara says exactly what do they like living by the city? The water is contaminated, the land kills people. What's so good about living there? Yes, if anyone wants to know why people live in certain cities, this is the answer. Amar Chanan says, the charm, we'll soon see Chen is more of a romantic implication. There's a certain charm of a place where a person lives on the people that live there. Amar Rav Yechon says, there are these three types of charms that people find charming. The charm of a place on those that dwell in it. The charm of a woman to her husband. And Rashi points out this is even if it's the case that she isn't beautiful. And the charm of a purchase on the one who purchased it. Or even if he makes a mistake, he still thinks there's something good about it. Elisha was sick 3 times. One of them is because he was too quick to kill these 42 kids by bringing out the beers, and therefore he became ill. Are you familiar with who Gehazi is? No. Okay. So Elisha, So you're familiar, interesting story. So how did Elisha become the prophet? You know that story?
I don't.
Eliyahu Hanavi was the prophet. Elijah the prophet, obviously, it's all in his name, right? Yeah. So Eliyahu Hanavi was the prophet. Eliyahu Hanavi has this famous showdown with the false prophets of the Baal at Mount Carmel. That's the Haftarah, I believe, of Parashas Yisisa. And at some point, Eliyahu Hanavi is summoned to appear before God, and that's some loose way of saying he died. Eliyahu Hanavi did not die in the technical sense. He was traveling, and he had a student that came out to greet him. That student's name was Elisha. Elisha asked for permission to go tell his parents he wants to join him on the trip, and Eliyahu Hanavi said, "You can't go tell them. Either you come with me, you don't come." And Elisha came with him, and they traveled to a certain point, and a chariot of fire met Eliyahu Hanavi. He entered the chariot, and he went up to God. And Elisha saw him going up to God, and he promised Elisha he would have twice the amount of twice the spiritual power as he did. Anyway.
Wait, Rabbi, are you saying there was a profit motive involved?
Always. Anyway, Elisha served as the prophet. He was guiding the kings, guiding the people, and Elisha had a gabbai, you might want to call him a gatekeeper. His name was Gehazi. And we'll soon see Gehazi was not exactly the most righteous gatekeeper. You look through, you see he was very. For example, we'll get to that in a moment. For example, when Elisha stayed in the house of the Shunamis, we don't know what her name was. We just know that she's the woman from Shunem, and she built him an attic to stay privately. The Shunamis refused to tell Elisha what type of blessing she wanted, but Gehazi told her she was childless. So Elisha promised her a child. She had a child. 3 years later, the child died. So this is one of the haftarahs. I can't remember which one it is. Anyway, so she went to Elisha to complain to him. Not expect. So her husband sent her to Elisha. She went to Elisha. Elisha said to Gehazi, "Take my stick, touch the child, and the child will wake up. But don't talk to anybody along the way. You have to walk silently from here until you touch the child will wake up as soon as the stick touches him." Of course, Gehazi didn't listen, and sure enough, the child did not wake up from the stick. And then Elisha himself had to come and revivify the child, and eventually that child was Yonah. Okay, there were two versions. Some say it was a different one. Okay, it's a child. Tysus talks about it at some point. Anyway, so this is Gehazi. Gehazi is sort of this. He's the gatekeeper of Elisha, and not exactly the most righteous fellow. So eventually, we'll see what happened shortly. Gehazi was pushed away from Elisha, and maybe Elisha should not have pushed him away as strongly as he did. Okay, and a final illness, and a final illness which eventually he would die from. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Elisha chala es chayav asher yamas by. Elisha became ill with a sickness that he would die from. So that's 3 times sickness is mentioned. Chala es chayav asher yamas by. Okay. Now the Gemara talks about being careful not to push away sinners too strongly. A person's left hand should push and his right hand should turn around. Of course, the obvious notion here is what happens if your right hand brings closer and your left hand pushes away? You turn the guy around, right? Which is exactly what's supposed to happen. Okay, like Elisha, not like Elisha should dachvul the Gehazi b'shtei yadav. Elisha pushed away Gehazi with 2 hands. But like Yeshua ben Prachya, she dachvul echel mitamida b'shtei yadav. Yeshua ben Prachya pushed away his students also with 2 hands. So the Gemara says, Elisha Mahi. What's the story of Elisha? One second. Okay. So what happened was Naaman was a general. He had a severe illness on his skin. He came to Elisha to be cured. Elisha told him to go to the Yam HaMelech, the Dead Sea, and to dip in it a few times. Now, what happened was Naaman offered a tremendous reward to Elisha. Elisha refused the reward and swore by God's name he would not take the reward. Then Gehazi came running after Naaman and said, "Oh, Elisha changed his mind. He wants 2 sets of clothes plus some silver and gold." And of course, that was a profit motive. Okay, and of course, Naaman didn't believe him, so Naaman made him swear in God's name because it was the only way he was going to believe him anyway, and he did, and he lied. And he took some talents of gold and silver and some change, some suits. Oh. Anyway, he came back to Elisha. Obviously, you don't play games with a prophet, certainly not for profit, and therefore Elisha saw right through the whole thing. He told him, "My heart is not with you the way you've behaved. Lakachas, what you've taken is as a kesef, lakachta begodim, the 2 things. V'zeisim kromim 3-4, v'tzayin bakar 5-6, v'avadim ashvachas 7-8. So you've taken 8 things from Naaman. He didn't. He only took 4 things. So the Gemara says, "Mi shagal kulahai." I take that much. I kesef begodim hu shagal. It was gold. Sorry, it's 2 things: silver and clothes. Rav Yitzchak explains. So when happened, we'll see what happened in a moment. At that moment, Elisha was dealing with the laws of the 8 types of bugs, and that's why 8 items are listed. It's sort of a reference to the 8 bugs. Which ones are tummy? Which one is tar? Amar Loi, so he says to him, Rashi, by taking these two changes of clothes plus these talents of silver, you have foregone all your reward in this world. You've cashed it out, so to speak. But Saras Naaman and the leprosy of Naaman, Tidbek B'cho v'Zaracha Lo'elam. You and your children will get this Saras. That will be your punishment. Anyway, that was the Haftarah a few weeks ago. We learned about the Arba Nashim Mitziram. What happened was there was a massive hunger. This was, I think, it was after of Kadeshim. There was a massive hunger in the land. This is when one of the kings laid siege, and there was a siege city. There was no one coming in and out. There was no food, and Elisha promised the prophet that by tomorrow, food is going to be so cheap, it's going to be so abundant, you'll be able to buy 5 measurements of flour for a shekel. And there was one person there. He didn't believe the prophet, and he said, "You think is God going to rain bags of flour? Like, it's impossible." So Elisha turned to him and he said, "Because you don't believe, you'll see it happen, but you won't benefit from it." And sure enough, there were 4 people that were Mitziram. These were Gehazi and his children, and they were at the edge of the camp. They couldn't come in because they were Mitziram. And what happened was, God scared the entire camp. They ran away, leaving everything behind. All the food, all the weapons, all the equipment, all the material was left behind. So they said to themselves, if we're starving. If we go to the city, we'll starve in the city. If we go to the camp, maybe they'll kill us, maybe they'll give us some food to eat. So let's go to the camp. They went to the camp, and sure enough, the camp is empty. It's deserted. And they take a bunch of food. They say, "Well, everybody else is starving. Let's go tell them." They went back to tell them. Sure enough, the king himself didn't really believe in God. He had to send 2 men on horseback. These were the last 2 horsemen that existed in the city. There were only 2 horses left. And they toured the entire camp. It was all empty. They came back and they said, it's true. It's completely empty. They sent everybody out. And that watchman, that messenger to the king who didn't believe Elisha, was trampled to death. So he got to see the bounty, but he was not able to eat it. So these 4 Mitziram, who are these 4 Mitziram? This is Gehazi and his 3 children. Why did Elisha go? He went to bring Gehazi back to have him do tshuva. He didn't go back. He didn't return. He says to him, "Why don't you do tshuva?" He says to him, anyone who causes many Jews to sin does not have the ability to do tshuva. My avad, what exactly did he do? Some say, Evan she'eves tol lechatas Yeravim, v'hem ben Shemayim la'aretz. Yeravim was a previous general that had caused many of the Jews to sin. And one of the ways Yeravim caused them to sin was he created a floating animal. And the people bowed down to this god. How did it float? It floated by magnets. It was magnetically suspended. So before we understood about microfarads and microfarad, he walked the planet and all this, and taught us all these things. You had to know which stones were actually magnetic, ferromagnetic. So it was a skill, and what happened was Geches, he knew how to do this, and he was able to assemble the magnets in a way to suspend this idol in the air.
Yeah, magnetic personality.
Some say Shem Chakala Puma. He knew Kishif. He knew how to do magic, and he engraved the name, God's name, on the lips. And this idol would say, "Say, I am the God who removed you from Mitzrayim. You shouldn't have any other gods." And some say Rabbanon Docham Mikamei. He pushed rabbis away from Elisha. He did not allow them to learn Torah from Elisha. After Gehazi departed, the student said, it's a very small synagogue. This is an interesting story what happened afterwards. Okay. Evidently until that date, it wasn't tight because Gehazi was kicking everybody out. Okay. Anyway, it's interesting. Despite the fact that he was indeed Gehazi was a large sinner, he was a big sinner, it was still considered a complaint against Elisha for pushing him away too strongly. Okay, Rabbi Shimon Prachia Mahi. What's the story of Rabbi Shimon Prachia? Mahi. Now remember, Shimon Prachia, contemporary of Niti Harabeli. This is like before Hillel and Shammai. Mahi Kedahava Kotel Yanai Malka L'Rabbanon. Yanai the king. Yanai was a descendant of the Hashemonic dynasty. He was the child of a slave. Eventually, he took power and he killed out every single rabbi, except one. Shimon ben Shedach at Minu Achsei. His sister hit him. Eventually, Yanai decided to stop killing out the sages, and he brought back Shimon ben Shedach. Rabbi Shimon Prachia Ozl Orak Alexandria Shemitzrayim. Rabbi Shimon Prachia ran away to Alexandria in Egypt. Shalma, when there was peace and it was no longer a threat for rabbis. Shalach Shimon ben Shedach Mini Yerushalayim Ir Kodesh. I am in Jerusalem, the holy city. You have this impressive city in Egypt. My sister, my husband, is sitting in a beautiful city, but I'm sitting desolate of scholars. Amar, he says, evidently there's peace, and Yanai will welcome back Torah scholars without killing them. He also, when he came, he decided he's going to go back to Jerusalem. He stops by at this house. Be shopter, obviously Kara Tova. So basically, the guest they really brought out and honored Rabbi Shimon Prachia for passing through, and they accorded him a tremendous amount of dignity. They served him with a tremendous amount of honor. The Kamishtabach, and he was saying, "Kama noach tzanizu." How nice is this hostess? One of his students says, Rabbi, Einav Trudas, her eyes are round. So Amalai says to him, Rasha, wicked one, Bekachat Isaac, you're looking at a married woman. Apik, Arba Mea Shfurei Vishamti. He took out 400 shofars and he blew the shofars and put the fellow, excommunicated the student. He tried to repent, and every day he came back and tried to repent, and he wouldn't accept him. One day, he was reading Kriya Shema when a student approached him. His student approached him, and he intended on welcoming him. He showed him in his hand. He made a signal like this, and he thought he was pushing him away. He actually intended I'm telling him, just wait a moment. I'm going to finish Kriya Shema, and then I will accept you. So the student was so insulted. He took a rock, stood it up, he bowed down to it. Amrlei, at some later point, Rabbi Shimon Prachia said to him, why don't you repent? Amrlei, I accepted from you the following tradition. Anyone who causes others to sin, they do not give him the opportunity to return. The Amar Mara, we learned kishif, sorcery, v'hissis, v'hidiach. This is missionary activity, v'hechli Yisrael, or someone who causes others to sin. All these categories are not accorded the opportunity to return. Speaking of the importance of not pushing away a student too strongly, Tanya Rav Shimon Elazar says, Yetzer, that is sexual desire, Tinak is a child, V'isha is a wife, Tehe Smol Doicha V'mimik Hareves. person has to balance their relationships, that in a certain sense, there has to be a little bit of pushing and a little bit of drawing close. Okay. I'm just gonna ask for a second. Sure. Okay, I'll start off with a little bit of a Gemara, and then it gets pretty sobering. It's talking exactly about the time that we live in. Okay, Nimtza Harag Achalei Nerfa Egla. Let's say you find the killer before they did Egla Rufa. Teitze v'tira ba'eder. So the animal is sanctified, but you have to leave it out to pasture. But you don't actually perform the event of Egla Rufa. Misha Nerfa Egla. Once it was already sliced, it was cut in half. To cover it's buried in its place. Shal Safik Basam et Chilasa. It's come because of a doubt. So because you brought it, it's provided the kapara, and even if you find the murderer afterwards, it doesn't impact the kapara that it had. The atonement. Okay. Let's say you killed the animal, you kill the animal, and then you find the murderer. You kill the murderer. The egla rufa does not atone for the murderer. It atones for the people not behaving properly. But the murderer is still punished. He gets capital punishment. He's killed. One witness says, I saw the murderer. And one says you didn't see it. Two women get into a fight. If one of them saw the murderer or not. They would do the process of egla rufa. One witness says, I saw it. Two witnesses say you didn't. They would do egla rufa. Two people say we saw the murderer. One person says he didn't. They would not do egla rufa because we know that there was a murderer, and we know that somebody knows where the murderer is. That's enough not to do egla rufa. When murder wasn't prosecuted accordingly, egla rufa, they stopped doing egla rufa. Mishaba Eliezer ben Dinoi Utchina ben Prisha Hayanikra. When this person Eliezer ben Dinoi, he was the mafia boss. Some people eventually was called Tchina ben Prisha. Chazulik Roise ben Haratzkan. They would call him the child of a murderer. 1 second. Yeah, they called him the murderer's son. He was a well-known mafiosa. Misharabu Hamanafim, when adultery became common, Pascal Hamayim Hamorim, they stopped performing the cited procedure. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai himself was the one who stopped it. Remember, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, where he fits in. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is a student of Rabbi Gamliel, student of Rabbi Shimon, student of Hillel. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is the one who was smuggled outside of the temple during the siege, during the Roman siege, right? In Sethus Gittin. He lived through the destruction of the temple. He was the leader of the people before and after. Okay, so he was one who stopped. He came because everyone sinned with adultery, and because the waters won't check anymore because adultery was so common. Mishameis Yossi ben Yezer, Ish Tzreid of Yossi ben Yehudah Ish Yerushalayim. Yossi ben Yezer, by the way, lived well over 130 years, probably 170 years before the destruction of the temple. Right? They are the first generation. They were students of Shimon HaTzadik, who's the last of the Great Assembly. Right? If you learn the Sotah, the first parak, they are the first authors. Yossi ben Yezer and Yossi ben Tzreid happened. They were the generation before the Hanukkah miracle, where the Greek influence first began. Yossi ben Yezer's nephew was one of the early Hellenizers. Okay, so when they died, Botlu ha'eshkailas. Eshkailas, Gemara will explain, is ish asher kol bai. These are people that had everything in them. In other words, every person looks at rabbis, he says, this rabbi I like that part I like this part of that rabbi. These people that had every aspect of every rabbi, and that's why until their days there was no machlokes. There was never a debate because they had true greatness. Shenemar ein eshka lechol b'chayra ois nafshi. Second, Yeah. So we see here there's no clusters. Eshkol is literally a cluster, and it's something that people desire. And the reference here is obviously that at some point these great scholars would disappear. Yochanan Kohen Gadol Hever Hadiyas HaMeiser. Yochanan Kohen Gadol ended the Vidui Meisers. We'll explain what that means. We'll explain why as well. Afa Botel Es Ma'orin Ve'es HaNoikfen. Okay, he abolished the wakers and the strikers, and we'll explain what exactly those are. Ad Yamav Hayapadish Makav Yerushalayim, until his days, people would work out loud in Chol Hamoed. So Chol Hamoed, one is only allowed to do work that is needed for Chol Hamoed. But Yochanan Kohen Gadol said that if you're a blacksmith and your work involves a tremendous amount of noise, you cannot work in Chol Hamoed regardless. Ubiyamav Ein Tzarich Lishal al Hadmai, and he was the one who instituted the laws of Dmai. And the reason for that is because he created the concept of Dmai. Dmai is a food that we don't know whether it was tithed correctly or not. And therefore, before that day, people were always asking, trying to figure out if it was or if it wasn't. He said, no, from now on, everybody has to treat it as if it's untithed. Okay. Tanur bottom. If the Eglah Rufa was killed and then the murderer is found, we don't exempt the murder from his penalty. The land will not atone for the blood of the dead body, except with the blood of the man who killed him. The penalty for killing is capital punishment, and Eglah Rufa does not atone for that. Okay. So now we get back to this famous discussion of Eid Echad, which is the third time it would show up in this Masechta. Okay, time in the Makashle. If we have a contradiction of witnesses, then we say that we bring in Eglah Rufa. But if even one witness knows that there was a murderer, then we do not bring Eglah Rufa. How do we know this? We don't know who killed him. If we do know, even a single witness, even someone somewhere, there was no Eglah Rufa. Rabbi Kiva says, if the Sanhedrin saw the murderer, but they don't know who it was, they would not do Eglah Rufa. Our eyes did not see the murderer. But if they did see the murderer, then they would not bring Eglah Rufa. The Gemara says, and now that you're telling me that a single witness is believed to say that he knows who the murderer is, so how could somebody contradict him? We've seen this before. Ula taught, okay. In certain instances, the Torah said a single witness is believed. For example, a single witness is believed to say that a woman who had Kinyan Stira was laid carnally with another man. And if a single witness says it, he's believed. And at any time a single witness is believed, they have a force of two witnesses, which means that you can't contradict them. So why is it if two witnesses come, one says I saw the murderer, the other one says you couldn't have seen the murderer? Why is it that neither is believed? We should believe the one that says I saw the murderer, because he's the one the Torah believes. Ula says Tani Lohayu Orphan. Ula says, no, you're right. In that situation, there would be no Eglah Rufa, because we believe the single witness that says that I know who the murderer is. There would be no Eglah Rufa in that scenario. Rav Chia says Tani Hayu Orphan. Okay, Rav Chia says they would do Eglah Rufa. Rav Chia kasha the Ula like kasha. So according to Rav Chia kasha the Ula, according to Rav Chia, this statement of Ula is difficult. If a single witness is believed because he has a special, Torah believes him, then why is another single witness believed to counter him? Torah doesn't say that you're believed to counter a single witness. It just says a single witness is believed to say he saw the murderer. Gemara says like kasha, not difficult. If they come together, so we accept neither testimony. However, if they come one after another, we've already accepted the testimony of the first one, and that he knows who the murderer is. Therefore, the second one is not believed to contradict. Tanan, let's look at the second half of the Mishnah. One witness says, I saw the murderer. You couldn't have seen him. Two people say you could not have seen him. Hayu arfin, they would do egla rufa. But if there was a single contradiction, lo hayu arfin, they wouldn't do egla rufa. To give to Rav Chia, this is a kash on Rav Chia, because according to Rav Chia says that one against one, there is egla rufa. The Gemara says, hold on. Let's look at the end of the Mishnah. Two people say we saw the murderer. One says you didn't see it. There's no egla rufa. Why? That's because two witnesses say we know who the murderer is. But if it was one against one, they would do egla rufa. Okay, so in general we have a contradiction. The second half of the Mishnah, we have two against one and one against two. The halacha is we believe the two and not the one, but to opposite effect, right? Two say we know who the murderer is, then there's no egla rufa. Presumably, if there was only one, there would be egla rufa, one against one. But the other implication is the opposite. Two say we don't know who the murderer is, and one says he does. We believe the two. But if it was one against one, we believe the two, and there is egla rufa. But if there's one against one, then we would not believe him, and there would not be egla rufa. So it seems to be a contradiction. We together? We together? We have a okay. So Gemara says, our mission is not even talking about kosher witnesses, it's talking about non-kosher witnesses. And according to the opinion of Rabbi Dovid Yehudah, any instance where the Torah believes a single witness, so we believe the majority opinion, even if the majority opinion is technically speaking doesn't qualify for kosher witness. We treat a contradiction of two women against one woman as if there were two men against one man. And some make a slight variance to the statement of Rabbi Nechemia. They say, if we have a single kosher witness, that witness reigns supreme. However, where you only have invalid witnesses, just let's say women or other people who are invalid for witness, for testimony. Explain Rabbi Nechemia's statement as follows: go by majority opinion in any place where the Torah believes a single witness. Two women against one woman are just like two men against one man. Against one man. But two women against one man, is considered equal. Okay. And therefore the Mishnah is saying that you go by the majority opinion. That's the message of the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, why do I need two instances where you have in either instance you have a majority of non-kosher testimony? That you go based on the majority opinion of invalid testimony in a scenario where the Torah believes a single witness, whether it's the kula, whether it's to be lenient, or l'chumra to be stringent.
Just related to where the Torah believes one witness.
So this concept of majority testimony with invalid witnesses only works in where the Torah believes a single witness. Yeah. Okay. Misha Rabba Haratzchanim. We had when it was murder became quite common. Tana Rabbanim Misha Rabba Haratzchanim Botla Egla Rufa. Egla Rufa stopped. Shafisha Ena Ba Ela Ala Safek. Because Egla Rufa comes for a doubt. We don't know who killed him. Misha Rabba Haratzchanim Begoli Botla Egla Rufa. But when people started, when murder became common, so then it's too common. People know who murdered. There's no point to bring in Egla Rufa. Misha Rabba Hanayafim, when adulterers became common. Tana Rabbanon Venika Ish Me'avan, and the husband will be clean of sin. When the man is clean of sin, that's when the water is check his wife. And if the man is not clean of sin, the water does not check his wife. And another verse says, I won't check your daughters because there is adultery. What does V'aymer mean? If you tell me, maybe it means just the husband has to be clean of sin. But even if his daughters or his sons are promiscuous, then the water would still check his wife. So the Gemara says, that even if its children are promiscuous, then the water would still not check his wife. The only time the Sotah process would work is when adultery is treated as a severe crime. and nobody does it. But if it's commonplace, then his children are promiscuous, then the water will not check his wife. If you tell me, let's say that people are only stringent about keeping the laws of adultery, but a fling between two single people, that would not impact the man's purity. They're spending time with harlots and prostitutes, which obviously is not, these are not married people, and despite that, it's still called a sin, which the water would not check his wife. A nation who doesn't understand, will tire. The prophet says to the people, if you'll be careful with yourselves, the waters will check your wife. The waters will not check your wives. Okay, we're at Misha Rabbi Bali Hanor, and very, very sobering. We'll continue from here. What time is it? 48. We'll continue from here tomorrow. At least we got a plot done. Hopefully we have to do that at least tomorrow. Okay. All right. God willing, I will do my utmost to try to start tomorrow again. Tomorrow on Wednesday, and probably Thursday also, because we'll probably fall behind, or probably won't finish. I don't know if we'll finish site on Wednesday. We might have a little bit to Thursday. Then we have to still Thursday. We'll have to prepare Gittin also. Just a little vague introduction. I thought Gittin is it's interesting. The beginning of Gittin is quite